Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into a stack of sources you've shared with us, all uh, really zeroing in on a fundamental question about artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's quite a set of materials.
We're looking at what the sources are saying are the real limitations of the AI we're using right now,
Mhm.
and exploring this powerful vision they present for something called evolutionary AI.
That's right. And the core idea, across these documents is pretty stark. They argue that current AI, once its training is done, essentially becomes rigid.
Rigid.
Yeah, it's described in the materials quite vividly, actually, as being like cement. It just can't learn or evolve further on its own.
Like cement. That's quite an image. So the idea is it just reacts passively to inputs independently each time.
Exactly. And crucially, the sources say without holding on to context or actually learning from the interaction itself.
So it doesn't get smarter just by talking to you, for example.
No, not inherently. This fixed learning model, as one source calls it, that's highlighted as the fundamental thing holding it back,
Yeah.
preventing it from adapting or, truly partnering with us.
Okay. So our mission for this deep dive is clear then. Based specifically on the insights in these source materials you gave us, we're going to break down this core problem
Practical limitations.
and then explore the proposed future, this evolutionary AI, where AI isn't just a static tool, but maybe a continuously learning partner. Let's jump right into what these sources actually reveal.
Sounds good.
So the sources don't just vaguely point fingers, do they? They seem to really zero in on, what, just three core flaws?
That's right. Three specific characteristics that they argue chain today's AI, preventing it from becoming, well, personalized or evolutionary.
Okay, where do we start? What's the first one?
The first critical limitation these sources identify is something they term error blind.
Error blind. Okay.
So, the sources explain that current AI, it relies heavily on inductive reasoning. Essentially, right, it generalizes patterns it learned from its training data.
Which is always limited inherently.
Exactly. And the challenge these documents highlight is that reality, it's infinite, it's constantly changing. This creates potential mismatches, big ones sometimes, between the AI's learned patterns, which come from that finite data, what they call data-based local generalization,
Right.
and the much broader reality-based generalization you actually need to navigate the real world effectively.
And the AI doesn't see this mismatch.
That's the fascinating and maybe concerning part. The sources state that because the AI uses these fixed learned generalizations after training, it just cannot detect these mismatches on its own.
So it literally doesn't know when it's out of its depth. When its learned patterns don't fit what's actually happening, it can't see its own error.
Precisely. It's like, think about training a driver, but only on straight, sunny roads. They're great there. Perfect. But then you put them on a winding mountain road, in the fog, a situation totally outside their training data.
Right. Completely different.
Well, according to these sources, the AI version wouldn't even realize it was struggling or making, potentially dangerous judgments because it's operating outside its trained experience. It doesn't know what it doesn't know.
Do they give an example?
Yeah, they do. There's one about an AI trained extensively on cat pictures.
Standard stuff.
Right. But then it sees a cat in the water. Now,
Yeah.
that specific context might be way outside its core training distribution. So it might make a wrong judgment.
Okay.
And crucially, it doesn't know why it's wrong or even that it's wrong. It just applies its existing patterns however badly they fit.
Wow. And even if, say, a person spots the error.
Well, that's another key point from the sources. Even if that mismatch is detected maybe by a human overseer or another system, the sources are clear. The AI cannot reflect those results internally. It can't adjust its subsequent outputs based on that feedback.
So it just keeps making the same kind of mistake.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally stuck with its original fixed model for that interaction cycle. This inability to detect or act on these pattern mismatches, whether from generalization issues or misinterpreting complex reality with its limited learned patterns, which is another point they stress.
Right.
It means you constantly need external help. A third party, human or otherwise, has to spot the problem and potentially, hit the brakes. Stop the AI from operating incorrectly.
Okay, so error blindness. It can't see its own mistakes, or when reality doesn't match its training. That leads us nicely into the second limitation these sources pinpoint, solution deaf.
Right. It builds directly on that. Because if the AI is operating with these potential undetected errors, the problem, as these sources really elaborate on, is that even if a higher intelligence, maybe a person, maybe another AI, does spot an error, spots a problem,
Yeah.
and actually tells the AI about it. You give it the feedback.
Okay.
The AI cannot self-correct. It can't respond to that feedback dynamically in the moment.
So it hears the feedback, maybe logs it somewhere, but it can't actually use it to adjust how it's working right then and there.
Exactly. The sources tie it back to that fixed, like, cement nature again. Once trained, it just reacts passively, independently to each new input, always using its preset learned patterns.
So telling it, hey, that was wrong, doesn't stop it from processing things the same way for the next input.
Not immediately, no.
Yeah.
It can't stop or alter its internal recognition, its
Hmm.
processing, based on that external error feedback. Nor can it, like, immediately use that error information for some kind of quick self-retraining that would apply to the very next thing it does.
The sources seem pretty emphatic about this.
They aren't. They explicitly say the AI cannot self-stop recognition, even when it's told there's a problem. It needs that explicit external intervention to actually halt its process or initiate some kind of change.
So not just blind to errors, but also deaf to solutions or feedback while it's running.
Blind and deaf in a functional sense, yeah,
Which brings us to the third critical limitation that the sources identify, passive retraining.
exactly. So this one deals with what happens after an error is caught. Maybe that third party flagged it.
Right.
This limitation means even with those error samples, identified the times the AI messed up, the AI cannot autonomously retrain itself using those specific examples.
It can't learn from its mistakes, even when they're pointed out.
Not on its own, no. It
Yeah.
cannot by itself decide, okay, this was an error, I should add this to my knowledge, or I need to integrate this as a new pattern into my existing model.
So how does it get better then, according to the sources?
Well, that's the passive part. The sources emphasize this isn't something the AI initiates. It requires that third party again.
The supervisor.
Right, to actually review those error samples,
Hmm.
maybe define new labels for them, and then explicitly instruct the AI on how to incorporate this additional learning. It's a whole separate process.
So the AI isn't proactively seeking out its weaknesses.
No. According to these documents, it cannot independently identify and learn from its own blind spots. Doesn't matter if those failures were, just outside its training data or maybe even technically within it, but misinterpreted.
And this whole retraining process needs managing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The sources state this necessitates someone or something with management or supervision authority. They have to instruct the retraining. And critically, they also have to manage the data quality and the labeling for all that additional learning data.
It sounds very manual, very human intensive.
It is. It's an externally driven process, which really highlights how dependent current AI is, even for just basic improvement over time.
Yeah.
It needs that constant oversight.
Okay, let's pull that together then. Error blind. Can't see mistakes. Solution deaf.
Yeah.
Can't act on feedback while running. Passive retraining.
Mm.
Can't fix its own errors even when they're found.
Mm.
That really paints a picture, based on these sources, of current AI as, incredibly powerful within its box.
Absolutely, within its training scope.
But fundamentally static and
Mhm.
heavily reliant on constant manual external help to handle anything unexpected or even just to get better. That feels like the critical takeaway here about the current state.
I think that structure of limitations is precisely what the sources use as the jumping off point to pivot to their proposed solution, moving beyond these hurdles towards what they're calling evolutionary AI.
Evolutionary AI. Okay, what's the vision there?
Well, the core vision they present is for AI that learns much more like humans do. It can self-evolve. It learns from its mistakes, like in the moment.
Right.
And crucially, it evolves with the user through continuous interaction. It gets better because you're using it.
Okay, so how does this next generation AI, as they call it, overcome those three big limitations we just talked about, according to the documents?
Right, so they map it out directly. First, instead of being error blind, it would have self-diagnosis,
Self-diagnosis, meaning?
meaning it could internally detect and recognize its own mistakes.
Yeah.
And not just spot them, but actively analyze the cause behind them without needing someone else to flag it.
Okay, that's a big change. What about being solution deaf?
That gets replaced, they say, with active learning. So, the sources suggest it could immediately reflect user feedback. You tell it something, or it infers from your interaction, and it improves based on that, like in real time.
Not just passively reacting to the next isolated input.
Exactly. It learns from the interaction. And third, instead of needing that whole passive retraining process,
Uh-huh.
it would demonstrate autonomous adaptation. It could actively respond to new environmental changes, new types of data, novel inputs, and adapt its own models independently.
Without needing manual retraining cycles, no third-party intervention for labeling and instruction.
That's the vision presented, yes. No manual intervention needed for that core adaptation loop.
Wow, that sounds, well, it sounds like a really profound shift, doesn't it?
It really does.
The sources seem to be highlighting a potential leap here
Yeah.
from AI as this fixed tool needing constant human prodding
Yeah, the hammer that stays a hammer.
to maybe an intelligent partner, something that actually learns and collaborates with people dynamically.
Language they use. Yeah, an intelligent partner.
Okay, this technical vision is definitely compelling, but let's shift gears slightly. Why does this matter? Beyond the tech specs. Let's focus on the real-world impact, the value proposition, as described in the sources you shared. Why should you, our listener, care if AI moves from being cement to being an evolving partner?
Right, and this is where the sources lay out what they see as significant market opportunities and potential value. It's not just academic.
Where could we see this kind of AI making a difference first?
They point to several fields where they think this shift could be immediately impactful. Medical applications, for instance.
How so?
Will potentially improve diagnosis accuracy, right? But also real-time learning from new patient data, maybe rare conditions, things that weren't in the initial training set.
Okay, makes sense. What else?
Education. They talk about truly personalized AI tutors. Tutors that could adapt dynamically to a student's specific learning pace, their challenges, their breakthroughs, moment by moment.
Instead of a one-size-fits-all AI lesson plan.
Exactly. Then there's customer service. Imagine progressively smarter conversational AI. Bots that actually get better, more helpful, more nuanced with every single customer interaction they have.
That would be nice.
Wouldn't it? And in manufacturing, they mention enabling real-time process optimization. AI that learns continuously, autonomously, from sensor data on the factory floor, reacting to unexpected changes or drifts in quality, maybe optimizing on the fly.
So big potential impacts across different sectors. What about the broader economic picture?
Yeah, the economic impact highlighted in the sources is also pretty substantial. I mean,
Hmm.
the global AI market is already huge, right? Projected to exceed, what, $1 trillion by 2030?
It's a massive number.
And this kind of autonomously learning AI, they see it as a key driver of that future growth. Specifically, they point to a significant reduction in maintenance and operating costs.
Because the AI retrains itself. Less human intervention.
Precisely. Automatic autonomous retraining drastically cuts down the need for humans doing that labeling, review, instruction cycle we talked about.
Right.
And this capability, they argue, will actually create entirely new markets. Markets for personalized, continuously improving AI services. And it'll drive major innovation in how companies operate, boosting efficiency across the board.
And if you're looking at this from, say, an investment angle or deciding whether to support this kind of research, what's the value proposition there, according to the sources?
Well, the sources frame it clearly. First, it's about gaining technology leadership,
Yeah.
getting ahead of the curve, potentially dominating the market in this next wave of AI.
Okay.
Second, cost innovation. Fundamentally changing that AI operation cost structure is a big deal. Less human intervention means lower costs.
Makes sense.
Third, diversified revenue streams from these new kinds of adaptive personalized AI services. And they even mention a positive social impact by creating AI that's inherently safer, more reliable, precisely because it can learn and correct itself, which, they suggest, should ultimately increase public trust in AI systems.
So it's clear from these documents, this isn't just about a technical upgrade. It's a vision for AI that's, well, more reliable because it can spot and fix its own errors.
Self-correcting.
More useful because it adapts to your specific needs, your feedback.
Truly personalized.
And ultimately, maybe a more effective collaborative partner, one that grows with you.
Yeah, that partnership idea seems central.
So based on the sources you've provided, where do things actually stand with this vision right now? Is it just a concept on paper, or is there more to it?
Well, the sources indicate that the basic algorithm research and even initial prototype development for this kind of evolutionary AI, they say that's already complete.
Oh, okay. So it's past the purely theoretical stage.
Apparently so. They mention that the next critical step, according to these materials, is really about forming strategic partnerships and, of course, securing the funding needed to move aggressively into actual product development and commercialization.
Do they mention any timelines or goals?
They do, actually. The goals outlined are quite ambitious. They're aiming for the first commercial product that integrates these capabilities within 18 months
18 months, that's soon.
is aggressive. And they're targeting, get this, a 10% market share within just 3 years of that product launch.
Wow. Okay, so they're not thinking small.
Definitely not.
This has been a really deep dive then. We started by exploring the picture these sources paint of current AI, powerful, yes, but also stopped. Kind of fixed like that cement metaphor once its initial training is done.
Yeah, powerful but static, limited in its ability to grow.
And we've explored the vision, presented right here in your sources, for an AI that can fundamentally move forward, that can learn, that can evolve autonomously.
Right. The core idea from these materials really is about self-learning AI,
Yeah.
about AI becoming a partner that grows with people. That phrase comes up.
So let's bring it back to you, the listener. Think for a moment about the AI tools you interact with every day. Your smart assistants, maybe recommendation engines, diagnostic tools, even those creative AIs.
They're everywhere now.
How much more powerful could they be? How much more useful? Maybe how much more trustworthy? If, as these sources propose, they could truly learn from your specific interactions, your feedback in real time,
Hmm.
if they could fix their own mistakes the moment they happen and adapt to entirely new situations, new information completely by themselves, without needing a team of humans to manually collect data, relabel it all, and instruct a whole new retraining cycle every time.
It changes the game, doesn't it?
It feels like it could. Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe something provocative. If AI can truly achieve this kind of autonomous learning, this dynamic evolution in real time, as these sources suggest might be possible, well, what does that mean for how we even define intelligence itself? And maybe more practically, what kinds of previously intractable problems could we potentially solve together with an AI that learns and grows right alongside us?